Good morning to everyone. And it's lovely to have this audience in this historic setting. Uh, Thank you very much, Anjum, for having us here. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm honored to be in the midst of such an august panel. And I'm looking forward to our conversation this morning. The very generous introductions actually were very humbling because the three ladies here by my side are such accomplished ladies. So my first question is not exactly going to do with the books that we're going to be talking about, but Madhurima, as a practicing endocrinologist, as someone who spends so much time as a doctor, how does your knowledge in the field of medicine help in your writing? Has it contributed in any way to the writing of your books?
Thank you for that question. I was asked yesterday a few times when I gave up medicine, and I'm so glad for this confirmation that I haven't actually given up medicine. But because I love the work I do, I find it very challenging. And I think uh, patients are, or people generally are at their most vulnerable with their doctors, which is not to say that I use their stories or breach their confidentiality in any way, but it does give one an insight into human nature. And I think Somerset Maugham, he made the same observation just before he wrote his first book. He was a doctor. He trained as a doctor. He actually got the material for his first book when he was practicing in a very poverty-stricken area of London. And I've seen that over and over again. So I have these little notebooks at home which are filled with notes from my student life. um, just things that I have seen, things that have touched me, things that I feel I should write about. And that is one part of it. The other, which perhaps touches historical fiction a little more closely, is the rigor of the research, or the, the urge, the concern for accuracy, the concern to make it as historical as possible. And I'm sure my co-panelists would agree on that. And it was a bit of a eureka moment for me when I realized my medical research skills could be translated fairly easily into historical research. So
That's absolutely fascinating to see how you marry the skills as a medical practitioner with the research skills, and we'll definitely delve more into this as the morning goes by. Harshali, I am completely in awe of the fact that you're a judge, you're an occupational therapist, and an author. My question to you is, how do your experiences as a judge or an occupational therapist impact your writing?
Thank you for having me here, Anjumji. And thank you for that question. Yes, I do get asked that a lot. And I think I've really pondered on that question a lot. And I've realized that I think the best way I can answer this is that my profession as a judge and my avatar as an author actually are like two sides of Newton's cradle, wherein, one ball hits and the momentum gets transferred to the last ball, which then swings. So I do use a lot of my engagement with people, so to say, when I'm on the side of the dais in my stories. And it also helps, I won't call it help, but yes, the fact that I'm surrounded by angst at all times, it does give a lot of real and raw stories to me, while I'm working. And as they say, that creativity starts from a question. So the question that, what would I do in a situation like this, gives rise to is the genesis of most of my stories. And they do kind of come together, bounce off each other, and sometimes just that very specific times there is that, there is a moment where they bounce off each other like two balls on a, like a table of, and they continue to move in a way that allows me to explore the particular question that I wanted to ask. And hence the story then comes about. So it's been a pleasure to be surrounded by people, engage with them, interact with them. And in fact, I did my occupational therapy, then went to academics, and then went to law. So I have pivoted a number of times, but the most common thread amongst all of this is the engagement with people. And hence that certainly helps, the fact that you can draw from that energy and then translate it, manifest it in your books. That is certainly very helpful.
That's something really fascinating, especially because I can see some number of young students in this audience, and I'm sure they'll be able to draw inspiration from these thoughts that both of you have expressed. Tarana, a similar question for you, that you are a cultural historian, and could you please tell us on how your experience in researching cultural history plays a role in the writing of your fiction?
It's wonderful to be at AKLF again. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, audience, for being here. Early morning on Saturday, winter morning. You see, I am the only one who's a full-time writer now. I used to be a teacher, but I gave up my teaching profession, which I loved. I was there for 16, 17 years, and I decided to go into full-time writing, mainly because I belong to a place called Rampur in UP. I don't know if you've heard of Rampur. It was a princely state, and when I settled back into Rampur after my meanderings in different places, I realized, of course, it was my ancestral city, my husband's ancestral city as well. What I realized was that there was so much that was being lost. Food, the culture, and so much was being lost even while, buildings were being broken down by politicians, the old heritage buildings, and, all that distressed me so much that I decided to really know the culture and the history of the place that I belong to, basically, at least one half of my family. And that informed my writing. So I mostly, till now, my writing is based on food history of Rampur. It is also based on gender. So the women of Rampur are the aspect that have just fallen off the pages of history unless they gave birth to a prince or a princess. So my first work was about one of these women in the harem and how they live in oral history. So definitely all this research, and then there's the beautiful Raza Library, which is the biggest library of manuscripts in India, if not in Asia, which very few people know about. So there was this desire to bring my city and its histories and its culture in different forms. So that inspired my writing.
That's really fascinating to know, and particularly I think there'll be many people here who don't know so much about Rampur. So as the conversation goes on, maybe we'll have an opportunity to hear a little more about your research there. Coming to the actual topic for today's discussion, historical fiction. When I first thought of this expression, it struck me as being almost like an oxymoron, because history is an academic discipline. It has, as Madhurima very rightly said, its own rigor. And above all, it is based on fact. At least it's meant to be based on fact, unlike a lot of things that go around these days in the name of history. But it's evidence-based, it's source-based. Whereas fiction, by definition, is something that you create. It stems out of creativity, it stems out of your imagination. So how do you actually put together something which is based entirely on fact with something which is actually comes out of storytelling and something that is an invention of your mind. So this is something that I would like this panel to dwell upon. So Harshali, in your book, you have specifically stated that your book is a work of fiction. But it's the fourth book in the Haveli series. So did this Haveli actually exist, or is it a figment of your imagination?
No, fortunately, the Haveli of the 100 Doors exists in Chandni Chowk, even today. And to give a little bit of context to the Haveli, I actually, in the entitlement of youth in college, had gone to Chandni Chowk with my college mates. And we just entered a Haveli, which was, or it was like a teal door, small teal door, and we just entered because we saw there was renovation being done there. And I've been born and brought up in government flats. So this opened a completely new world for me. It was, with the tall pillars and the chhatris and the jalis, you don't expect that to see all that beyond that small door. So that is when I realized that this Haveli is going to feature in whenever I do the writing. I was not coming from a place where I thought I would ever be writing stories and publishing them for that matter. So that was the genesis of the idea. That was how the seed was sown, so to say, for this Haveli series. And then when I started writing the book, I started imagining the Haveli that I would want, it to be. And I can't tell you, Amita ji, this is after 2 books had been written, the Haveli had sort of taken shape in my mind and on paper. And then, while doom scrolling, I saw this Haveli as if it was manifested out of my imagination. And I went and lived there for 2 days. It's called the Patan Mahal. I don't know if anybody's heard about it or not. It's in Rajasthan. And it was like whatever I had imagined while I wrote the books had somehow been manifested in front of me. So imagine that moment of, when I saw that Haveli, when I knew I could go and live there, and when I saw whatever I had imagined right in front of me as if by magic, I knew there was something special, in that need of mine to get this Haveli on paper. So certainly it's very much there. The book that I wrote before this was Anarkali. And Anarkali is some say she's a myth, but I truly believe she existed, though not much is written about her. And I've discussed this at length in the last year when I was here with Anarkali. But historical fiction I think it connects history, which is important to know, but also there is always a gap because it is written by human beings. So there are always going to be gaps, and our imagination or the fiction or the people that we want to see, they are the ones who form the bridge. That is the fiction that we bring into it, so that for the reader to know what the person or the characters we're writing about are relatable in today's time. So certainly I think historical fiction is a very important genre to be read, and Anarkali was the first time that I wrote about it. But I realized as I was reading and writing the new book, Whispers of the Buried Past, that I think my relationship with historical fiction had been going on for a long time.
Tarana, I'm going to come back to you on this question. You were speaking about your research in the library and how inspired you were being in a place like Rampur. Could you just briefly comment on how do you research a character like, say, Munnibai or Dag? And how do you actually bring them to life while you're writing fiction?
I think that's a wonderful question. You see, my work is generally on women. And women are barely written about, and they fall off the pages of history. The problem in historical fiction is, of course, it has to be based on facts. You can fill in the gaps with maybe a dialogue. Of course, you don't know what dialogues were said at that time. But the basic trajectory of the story should be real. And because I'm also a historian, that part was very important to me. So when I came upon these letters written by Dag to his lady love, Munni Bai Hijab, who was a Tawai from Calcutta, which is why it's so wonderful being here, because I've just come to Calcutta so many times, researching on Munni Bai, trying to walk the streets of Kolutola where she lived and the Nakuda Mosque area. So it was very difficult to understand what she was like. You know, I was bringing her to life based on letters written by her lover, because the writings of Munibai, who herself was a poetess of great renown of that time, so much so that she was called to Rampur, to the Benazir fair. It was like a lit fest of now. So even then her writings are lost, as was the case with a number of women poetesses of the time, because it was not a level field between the male writers and the female writers at that time. Things have definitely become better. So my book is about that women writers, even Gohar Jan or her mother, Malka Jan, even their divans, Malka Jan had a divan, even their divan was very difficult to find. So now I was imagining Munibai, her character, from Dag's poetry and his letters. Like he always says that, unko gussa aa jaye, khuda na kare. So no, she was quite a spitfire of a person, and who would just break his heart. And there was, of course, a huge age difference between them, but she was not overawed that here's this very famous poet who is in love with me. So I was trying to create that personality of Munibai, the real Munibai, not from the few, and also trying to find her writings, which I did. The whole trajectory in the book of their life, even some of the scenes are absolutely correct, because they are based on first-person account, because Dag was a very open person. He would say, oh, today Munibai came, and she's changed so much, etc., etc. And here was this pupil who would write down in the Rose Namcha, and today we are having a Patang Bazi contest. So, all these instances are very much there. They actually happened, which I have put in the... but yes, there is a thin line where you kind of go and imagine what happened between the two of them. What was this relationship like? You can only imagine. But yes, as a historian, you have to tread that line and be sure that most of it is correct. You can't go so much into the level of imagination. Of course, the characters are there to be imagined. The circumstances for instance, the wives in Kolkata, how did they live? What was the place like? The descriptions. Walking to Kolutola, what did they see from their kotas? What was going on down there? How did they live? So many things that were there from the descriptions, from the histories of that time. So it does require rigorous research. And if you look at Hilary Mantel, her work actually shows that you can write historical fiction, which is based on facts and which is historically correct, but it is in the realm of fiction, because it's popular fiction. We want you to know about Munni Bai Hijab and her love story with Dag Delvi. How do we do it? We can write an academic paper on it, or we can weave a story, and I'm sure you would love it.
Absolutely. I think when I was going through your book, preparing for this session, it really is quite a page turner. So, Madhurima, I will request you to also comment on this question whether a book actually comes under the realm of history or fiction. Now, Job Chanak and the Potter's Boy. I think every one of us sitting here knows that Job Chanak was a historical character. We've all heard of him. We know a fair amount about him. But who is this Potter's Boy? Is he a person who also features in history, or is it a fictional character?
So I didn't want to write about well-known people. And I wanted to write about people like us whom history bypasses really, or who are really not, they're not the great and good. So I took great pleasure when I was writing the afterword, which says that at least in this book, the great and good of history are the supporting cast. Because the characters, the main characters in my book are people who are ordinary, who are just out to make a living, who just want to lead their lives peacefully, have enough for their families, be happy in the ways they can, but who are swept away, whose lives are turned upside down by decisions that are not of their making, while administrators and kings and companies and powers play havoc with their destinies. And it keeps bringing to mind and to life the adage that, you know, when elephants fight, it's the grass that gets trampled. So it's about people like us. If, you know, if suddenly a war breaks out, who knows what collateral damage there will be. But in Job Chanak, what I also wanted to do was to bring to life the plurality that Calcutta is today. This is, shall we say, the beginnings of that plurality, because it's set in the late 17th century, 1686 to 1690 to be exact. And you had, obviously, before that, in Akbar's time, you had the Mughals and the Pathans in Bengal. And now the foreign powers, the European powers, are very well established. You've got the Portuguese for a fairly long time. You've got the English and the French and the Dutch, all making inroads. You've got the Arakanese, who are called the Mog, and all of these, and more. There's plenty more. There are the Armenians and many, many other people. And I think the one of the great pleasures in researching and then writing this book was that every new fact was a discovery. Little things, little expressions that we use in everyday life, in everyday Bangla, or in everyday language otherwise, comes from somewhere. And there's a fascinating history behind it. And that was one of the great pleasures in writing this book.
Was there any particular reason why you chose this period? Did it have any special interest? Like, for example, Tarana's interest came from the fact that she hailed from there, or her husband's family hailed from there. But was there any reason why you chose this period?
I've decided yesterday after the session that I'm going to add a little label to my name, which is going to be Proud Calcuttan. So I shall write endocrinologist, writer, and Proud Calcuttan. And I think that's where it started. I wanted to know what was going on. Too many histories of Calcutta, unfortunately, start with Job Chanak. And we all know that is not the case. I mean, it's very simple. There is a reason all these people wanted to come to Bengal. There is a reason Job Chanak wanted to come to Bengal. And the date, the 24th of August, 1690, was actually his third and final landing. So he'd already been once. He'd fallen in love with the place. He stayed the first time for many months, and the second time for a year and a half. And he was fighting the Nawab all the time because he said, I want Shutanuti or nothing. He was offered Uluberia, he was offered, he sort of conquered Hooghly and he left it behind. And he wanted Shutanuti, and I wanted to know what was going on in Shutanuti, what was happening in and around the city that we know today. And this is, if I may put it like that, this is Calcutta before Calcutta was an entity. So that was, it's like an origin story of the city to a certain extent.
I know that you put in an enormous amount of research before you start writing a book like this. Could you comment on what are the kind of sources that you mostly use in order to build up your research?
So usually books, hopefully by well-established historians. Uh, archive.org has been a wonderful resource. The good thing about having, well, getting books and reading them and reading bibliographies is that you can actually go into the original source material. And here I am slightly hampered by being a doctor, because then I would go into the original papers as well if I could find them. And then I would have to remind myself to stop researching and start writing. But not being a historian by training, I was paranoid about getting things wrong. So I think that perhaps was, well, it acts as a check, but it can also be a hindrance.
Thank goodness for hindrances of this nature, because I think not enough people put in that kind of hard work and effort that goes into it, and I think that is something which makes your work very special actually for a reader. Tarana, I would like to ask you that when you are writing historical fiction of the kind that you write, uh, what would you describe as one of the most challenging things about it?
Yes, so when you write historical fiction, the thing is that you are a modern woman, right? And you're writing about, for instance, in this, yeah, I'm a modern woman, I'm writing about a tawaif. Now, I don't want to have this woman face her challenges with the thoughts of a modern woman, you know. She should have her own thoughts, which would be based in the ecosystem of the time, the way she has been taught to think, the kind of constraints she knows her life has, the possibilities that her life offers or does not offer. So in order to recreate that time, it is easy to in fact say, okay, Kolutula looked like this, or this is right next to the Nakuda Mosque was Malka Jan's house. This is all historically correct. But it is more difficult to put the thoughts and the words in the mouth of your characters, and to have them think that, you know, that even the time had a different flavor to it. Today, we are looking at time in a different way. Over there, you know, you get to hear from someone after a month. A letter comes after a month. How were the letters written? And what was the reaction coming after, you know, another month? Something like that. So these are the things that are most challenging, because you don't want your character to sound like you know, especially women or the men. You know, and we just presume that, you know, everyone is just as free. Though, of course, the wives were freer than a normal woman at that time. Like, she was more educated. She had more access to knowledge and expression. She could express herself. But she was still living within the constraints. So that is the, you know, it should feel genuine and authentic. Her thoughts, her expressions, her actions should all feel very genuine and authentic. I think that's the most challenging thing.
That's really, really interesting, and I think you put that across so beautifully. Um, just as a follow-up to that, Tarana, do you ever feel when you are writing, do you ever feel the need to distort a historical fact in order to make your story more interesting or to make it more engaging for a reader? Do you feel that you need to distort historically accurate facts?
I never do that. Because, you know, something that happened might not feel good to me, but it did happen, you know. And if I just say, okay, I just put in some other episode which actually did not happen in order to make the story more interesting, then I'm not being true to history. I'm just being true to my readers, because readers have less patience now. They want things to be, but somehow you said that it's a page turner, right? So I guess it had its moments. Well, it had its boring moments also and sad moments also. But if I had inserted something more exciting or interesting or whatever, I think it would have been jarring because I would be again doing it from my modern woman's point of view or a modern writer's point of view. I didn't want that modernity to touch this tale.
Yes, in fact, even though I'm not a writer, I've been a history teacher all my career. Uh, but I think it's very important. I've always believed it to be very important to keep your story, to keep your narrative interesting, but at the same time not deviate from what actually happened. So I think that is the challenge. Madhurima, I'll also ask you the same question before I come to Harshali. Did you, while writing this book, did you feel the need to deviate from history in order to make your story more compelling?
No, not really. Not in the main arc. Uh, the only bit that is muffed a bit is about Job Chanak's wife. And I've mentioned that in the afterword because there's nothing about her. They found it very convenient to just leave her out of the records because she was a native woman. Yes. And there are mention of his daughters and his sons-in-law and even a young son who then dies, but their mother is nowhere in the picture. And it's one of the great mysteries which have been written about, both in fiction and in research papers. But I used her as a device, therefore, just to highlight the protagonist's coming of age. And I mentioned that at the end because again, it's very important for me to make sure that whatever I've put in the book is accurate. So just that bit, really.
I think that's something really what I think people who are now academic writers should actually learn from authors of fiction, that this desire to be true to what actually happened, because I think they are indulging more in writing of fiction in the name of history, but that's maybe for another conversation another time. Harshali, a lot of your writing is in this historic setting, the Haveli and this entire series that you are writing over there. Could you tell us a little bit about how difficult is it for you? Just like Harshali commented about writing about her writing is set in Kulutola, and she commented on the difficulties of that. Could you share your experiences about writing in the context of a historic monument?
So I was very sure that I wanted the Haveli to be alive. It forms as the narrator or the Sutradhar jisko kaha jata hai, for all the books. It's a series, the Haveli series is a series of 8 books. And through that, I wanted to create a world of the Haveli wherein the Haveli is a character itself. And it is part witness, it is part, a sentinel, so to say, and it is part prisoner in terms of the Haveli itself being important in the way the progression of the characters happen in each book. So the Haveli became a very integral part of the story. I didn't set out to do that, but I think I realized very early on that, even walls have a spirit. And hence, when I started researching about supernatural and about reincarnation and karmic debt that I've written about in this book, inevitably, I think the Haveli got pulled into it because essentially, where we stay or where we have lived for eons and decades and generations, those things, those walls and that stone also absorbs the guilt, sometimes the trauma, sometimes the patriarchal violence that occurs within the walls of those structures. And hence I wanted the Haveli to be a very essential part of moving the story ahead. So far as researching on it, I realized that the Havelis of India have a huge significance in our landscape and in our ecosystem as well. And hence, it was very essential that I broached it as a very elegant structural help or structural conduit for the story to kind of move through. The idea was primarily that, so just to give you a little bit of more context about the Haveli series, it's a series of 8 books, as I said, where a large family of 7 siblings live. The 3 books are about the 3 daughters, and each book deals with a theme. This book, of course, is about the only son between 6 sisters in northern India. And so here I wanted to delve more deeper into the, the self-loathing and the guilt this boy feels of not being able to achieve his dreams, and the fact that he has, unexplained guilt of not standing tall on his father's expectations. So societal expectations and how it kind of ties to people who, and how it changes people. The generational trauma that is coming down, the guilt that is coming down, how it kind of ties into the family and the secrets that it holds, and literally the skeleton that is buried. So these were the things that I wanted to research on, and how, what happens when you find a skeleton in your house? What happens? So the research was more practical based, contemporary, and what happens, what are the sort of nuances that come along with a young boy or the youth who feels so encumbered with parental expectations. So those were the things that I kind of focused on in this book, grounding the supernatural theme in human emotions was again as a very challenging thing to do, because all my characters, I've realized, when you start writing books, you realize what you're actually doing, probably unconsciously. And all my characters, I realized, are emotions, in human form. So like the main protagonist, Dheeraj, who's the boy, he kind of represents the youth of our country today, who is feeling burdened by whatever society demands of it. Then there is, of course, the other aspect of the young girl, Naina, who then represents the resilience and the rebel, that we also see simultaneously. There is, of course, the father and the son bond, or the rift that needs to be healed. So through this book, I wanted to explore about healing rifts in relationships and complex dynamics of families, which then a reader can look at and say that, okay, if it is possible, is it possible, first of all, because that's the question, and if it is possible, what are the solutions to do it? And at one point of time, I used to think that communication is how you solve issues. But with time, and maybe with my age progressing very fast, I realized that it's actually comprehension. I can keep communicating with somebody, but if you're not able to comprehend where I'm coming from, it's just silent chaos. So my research for this book was more human-based, on psychology, on the structure that we call home, and how those homes have spirits, and how they tie into our lives, on everyday lives, and the things that we do, and how past and future can collide. So that was my research in this book.
Very, very interesting. Just a little short question to add to what you've just said, Harshali. What actually drew you to the supernatural?
As I was saying, that karmic debts and reincarnation really fascinated me. And I think all the books have come from places where I was at that particular time. Maybe that's why they feel very real and raw to readers. Because I think where I am at that particular time in my life is very openly kind of, and I think every book becomes a catharsis for me then. Because then I'm exploring what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking during that phase of my life. So I think in this phase of my life, when I wrote this book, I was thinking a lot of those those silent interventions, those quiet interventions that sometimes happen to us. And I think all the people in front of me sitting in the audience today can pinpoint that particular point when you realize that this should not have happened for me, but it did. And sometimes there are people who will come into our lives at that exact moment and help us finish that job or that work or that project, or sometimes even allow us to emotionally evolve ourselves. So I think I was, in that moment, I wanted to explore more or delve more or drown myself more in this understanding of how karmic debts can carry through lifetimes, and is there something like this? Uh, it involved talking to a lot of people. It involved talking to a lot of psychics, people who call themselves psychics, and understand where is this feeling of not, or where is this feeling of coming from? Where do people, how do we meet somebody and know, oh, I like this person? And how is it that sometimes you meet somebody and say, I want to keep a handspan away from this person? Where is this coming from? So I think that is why I wanted to write about that, talk about that, explore that, and maybe understand why we are pulled towards a few people and why do we reject a few people. So I think that was where I was coming from.
Thank you very much. Tarana, a question for you before we open up the discussion to the members in the audience. You've done a lot of research on food. How I find that very, very fascinating. And I know that I've had lots of conversations with Madhurima as well, so she also shares this interest in food history. Could you please comment on how your research in food history impacts your writing?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I am basically a fiction writer. I love writing and reading fiction. So food history actually happened because I realized that my hometown had nearly 200 dishes, and now we have barely 10. So my question was, where did all these disappear? And then that began the food history, and I realized how techniques have changed, how dishes disappeared. And mostly, it was the Khansamas who decided not to share the recipes. So many things. That part of my work impacted my writing because I also now saw the characters in a whole way. For instance, Munibai Hijab hails from Lucknow, like her mother came from Lucknow with Wajid Ali Shah. So what would she be eating? How, while she's traveling, what would they carry with themselves? The other part of this story is another woman living in modern town Rampur who is researching the story. So she tries to calm down her problems and grief by learning how to cook. So that became a very important element in this book particularly. But I see that food is something that is of great interest to people. And how have our palates changed over time? How do the dishes transform over time? And how they are affected by socio-economic resources and ups and downs, especially in princely states. Of course, the whole ecosystem has disappeared, so things change. And these are the things that also help the character discover things about themselves. For instance, now this is a part that I put in fiction, that Munibai Hijab does not like to eat meat. Because she has had a traumatic experience. So this just adds depth to her. But I also wanted to show what are the other Bengali cuisine that comes into this basically Awadhi family, like sukto and ghanto and all the other vegetables that I totally love Bengali cuisine. So that just gave me an idea of what this Avdi family would feel about Bengali cuisine. They have settled here. They've come in 1857 and established themselves in Calcutta. So how have their taste changed? So definitely food became a very important element in this particularly, and I think it just made the book much richer. I never had my earlier fiction have so much of food context, but I think it does, because food is so essential to us. It's so much a part of our living, and people enjoy talking about food. In fact, I should have a recipe booklet along with it.
I think
No?
that would be a great idea, absolutely, because in fact, again, with my experience as a history teacher, uh, it was a guaranteed to get the interest of the class the moment we started talking about food or fashions. These are the two things from any history lesson that always evokes a great deal of interest. But I think we still have about 5 or 6 minutes, so I think it will be lovely if there are some questions from this gathering. Yes, sir, this gentleman in the second row, yes. We'll, uh, is there a volunteer with a mic? Yes, please.
This was discussed, but I'd still like a clarification. The debate between historical fiction and historian, that's perennial. But you have touched upon, given today's time when even academicians are writing, if I may say, within quote, dubious history. So as a historical fiction writer, where does your responsibility, I'll say, start and end in terms of the accuracy and because this is popular fiction, it will be read by more people, much more than academic. So in terms of the accuracy and the evidence, using the evidence-based sources, uh, especially in today's time, where does the responsibility as an author starts and ends?
Madhurima, would you like to take that?
I think I'll just read out a bit from my afterword because the afterword, the length of the afterword and the length of the bibliography were two very sore points because I kept insisting that they should be put in, and the publisher kept saying, no, there aren't enough pages. So I've said this is not a history book. That is the first line of my afterword. There are enough and more books on this period written by those who know what they are talking about. My debt to them is immense, but I have no pretensions to scholarship and would be the first to disabuse you of the notion that this book is anything but fiction. First and last, a story, imaginary events strung together over a skeleton of fact based on the sum of information available. So that is the way I did it. That is the way I have also, thank you.
Tarana,
Yeah,
would you
just,
like to comment on,
just a
because it's a
comment on
very
the-
important
it's a
question that
very important
the
question.
gentleman has raised.
See, even I have references in this book, the facts where I have taken the facts from, which are easily available. Having said that, if you look at the history of women, generally they live in oral history or maybe by reference. So do we still leave them out? You know, because my book is based on a woman writer who actually disappeared, and rediscovering her work and rediscovering her personality and the life events. So I do have an idea about the events based on historical sources, and also something about her character based on the contemporaries who wrote about her, brief biographies. So stringing them all together and putting, I think it's very important to look at the younger people today. Would they want to read a dry history paper? Look at William Dalrymple. Look at the wonderful work he's done, all Hilary Mantel. So William Dalrymple's work has, of course, sources over there. So does mine. It does have sources. But yes, I've added, like he also adds fiction to it.
So let me just add, just summarizing this. When I wrote Anarkali, they asked, why are you writing about this lady? And I said, look, she's an afterthought that a traveler wrote about in his record, just 2 lines that this lady was, this Kaniz was actually, buried alive, immured alive. Now, as Tarana very correctly said, that these are women who have not been, or people who have not been spoken about at all for decades, or they are used as props. And it is, so the facts remain the same. They are the blueprint that we follow, because wherever Akbar was, wherever Salim was, those things remain the same. But the lady is not written about at all. And so to bring her story to the forefront, so that anybody who's reading, as you very correctly said, it's popular. So people who want to read about a woman's rise from a nothing to the most important or one of the most important people who have impacted not one but two emperors, you know, those stories are essential as well. Their voices are very essential to be heard by people, and especially women, to make an informed choice about whether the same things that we were fighting in the 16th century, are we still discussing them now? We are still writing about them now. So it goes to show how our society has evolved. Has it evolved? That's the question.
In fact, just to sum up the question that you asked, I think in defense of these wonderful authors, I would say, nowhere do they say they are writing history. Whereas the dangerous people are the ones who say they are writing history, but actually it is fiction. So, and that is the danger is, and that is what gets circulated in our famous WhatsApp forwards. And then you have millions of people believing that to be historically accurate. But these ladies here who are painstakingly researched, and yet they still say we are writing fiction. So that's what I would say for them. I think, Anjum, you had a question. May we have a mic? And after Anjum, we just have time for one more question.
Yeah, this is a question to all of you. What do you feel is the charm of historical fiction? Why does it attract readers? Why are there so many people eager to read historical fiction?
Tarana, please.
I think people love historical fiction because, you know, a human being hasn't changed. Their choices have changed, their circumstances have changed. I think when they read about characters who lived at that time and the decisions they made, they want to evaluate it. Okay, these were the circumstances and this is what this did. What would I do if faced with a certain thing? And secondly, they love that atmosphere that existed. You know, you always want to know your roots. You always want to know what happened in this place. Or even if it's not the roots, you would want to know how this place looked like. What did, I always go back to Kolutola, what did it look like before the Central Avenue was made? How did the making of the Central Avenue change everything? You know, why were the Armenian quarters there and why was the Jorasako there? You know, all of that. So it is the inquisitiveness about your own place, inquisitiveness about the people, the choices they made, the circumstances they faced, and how they dealt with them. I think that's the reason.
I'll add to that that I think it's escape. It's looking in the rear view mirror and realizing that there was a time when it was a simpler time maybe, but there was more conflict. So I think everybody takes from historical fiction what they miss in their own lives. And that's why people keep going back to it, realizing that there was a time that people were simpler. People were trying to, the same struggles, as I was just saying a minute back, the same struggles, the same choices, and yet were they able to find any solution to that? Maybe I can find a solution through these stories, if possible. And if not, I think historical fiction is like an ocean. And every person who reads it, that choice is with them. Are they going to swim in the shallows? Or are they going to let go of the shore and see how it impacts them, how it takes them, makes them different? Does it change them? So I think it's the basic human nature of trying to look for something new, look for a different perspective of the same story maybe. So that is why we have so many people now looking at historical fiction from a different prism or through a different prism. And I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
My reason is very personal. It's a little silly. I do it for myself. I do it just because I love to do it. I love actually walking the streets of, wherever in 1879. If I have a directory open in front of me, 1879, and I see, oh, good Lord, Baligan Circular Road, such number, Ramesh Mitra lived here, so and so. So the streets that I know, and nostalgia, well, it's, because I love, it's my response, I think, to my love for history. I think that is, and it's a very deeply personal expression of that love. So.
That's lovely, absolutely. The last question for this morning, the gentleman in the third row, please.
First of all, I thank you all for giving such a wonderful talk and discussion. Small question is that to all the authors here, about your creations that you have already done. Do you review them from time to time? And anytime it occurs, oh, I could have gone for further research in these areas, probably I would have done a better justice to myself and my creation. So to all my authors, I am just asking that, do you go, and if it is so, then which areas you feel that, yes, these are the sources that remain untapped. Probably I could have tried and made a better creation. Do you all feel? That is a simple question to you.
Thank you. That's a bit of a googly, but I think we all go back to what we've written, whether historical or not, and sometimes we cringe at what we've written. So I think in all probability, it's probably better not to revisit things that are out there, unless there are glaring mistakes which have been pointed out. I think I speak for all of us when I say we do the best we can at the time of submitting the manuscript. It's reviewed usually very meticulously by the editors, whether in terms of facts or in terms of line editing or copy editing. And personally, I've had editors go to and fro, pointing out maybe something that I've got wrong, and we've both looked at it. So I think if you want to go on writing books, you have to do the best you can at the time. And if the intention is honest in that at the time you have done the best you can, really there is no reason to keep revisiting it. I mean, it's because we write fiction and not reference books or textbooks that need to be updated with knowledge that is available later on. I think that's what I would feel anyway. And if we did that, I think we would find it very hard to write new books, because we're always sort of going back to the old ones. And like I said, I have a problem because I need to stop myself from researching too much. I sometimes put too much in, and that has to be taken out in the interests of the story, because when you are reading a story, you do not want to be bogged down by facts. You want to keep turning the pages.
That having been said, but if there is some very crucial source that comes up and, what you've written is absolutely wrong, then definitely in the next edition, I would love to change it. If it's a glaring mistake, then, but once, one set is published, well, one can just go with it. You can't be perfectly knowing all your sources. You do try your best at that point of time, but maybe there will be an undiscovered source. To the best of our ability and our knowledge, this is true. That's what
I think
we are short on time, but
yes.
I'm just going to end with Robert Frost's line: begin in delight and end in wisdom. So I think that should answer your question.
Absolutely. I think, Harshali, you've summed it up very, very beautifully. And once again, to AKLF and Anjum in particular, thank you very much for putting this panel together. It's been an honor to be in conversation with all three authors. You've written terrific books, and I look forward to many more such sessions. Thank you for this wonderful audience who's been so beautifully engaged with us.
Thank you so much for having us here. This is
Ladies and gentlemen, the first session of day 2 of the APJ Kolkata Literary Festival. May we have a huge round of applause for our speakers here. Thank you. And on that note, I would like to thank the partners of the festival. The festival partner, Goethe Institute, Institute of France in India, Alias Fawcett Bengal, Antonym Collections, Glenburn Penthouse, Sunrise Pure. Refreshment partner, Cha Bar, Cafe Kotum. Gifting partner, Fluris, Hospitality partner Kenilworth Hotel, The Park Kolkata. Radio partner 91.9 Friends FM. Institutional partner Teachers Center and the Heritage College. Outdoor media partner Balaji Ads. And event partner Leven Events and Navkreet Events. Ladies and gentlemen, Sunrise Pure is our festival partner and they have set up a stall right at the venue. They have introduced 2 new masala into their segments, which is the Chinese fried rice masala and the peri peri masala. Requesting you to kindly go to the stall and collect free sample of those. They have also launched a book which is a collection of 250 stories across Bengal relating to Durga Puja. You can go check out the sample and you may scan the QR and download the PDF for free. Thank you.